The hospital parking garage smelled like wet concrete and exhaust, and I sat there in my Subaru with both hands on the wheel for what must have been 20 minutes after I cut the engine. My phone was face down on the passenger seat. It had buzzed 9 times in the last hour, and I had not picked it up once. I could feel the weight of what I had just done settling into my chest like a stone dropped into still water, and what surprised me was not the panic I had expected. It was the calm, a kind of dreadful, weightless calm that comes after you have finally said the thing you should have said years ago. Where are you watching this from tonight? I want to know because I have a feeling some of you have sat in a parking garage just like this one, trying to figure out how the people who raised you became the people you had to walk away from. My name is Harlow Brennan. I am 32 years old. I am the Senior Director of Risk Operations at a regional bank in Charlotte, and 4 hours before I parked in that garage, I'd been sitting at a long mahogany table in the private room at Vesper's Steakhouse downtown, watching my father slide a $7.200 dinner check across the white linen toward my plate. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before any of this happened, when my manager called me into his glass-walled office and told me that the regional VP slot was mine. I had been gunning for that promotion for almost 2 years. I had restructured an entire fraud detection team. I had cut $3 million in operational waste. I had worked weekends I will never get back. When he shook my hand and said the words, "effective, the 1st of next month," I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes. The good kind of crying. The kind where you finally exhale a breath you did not know you had been holding since you were 22. That was the same morning my mother called. She did not know yet. Nobody knew yet because I had not told a single soul. But somehow, my mother always knew when something good was happening to me. It was like a sonar she had developed back when I was in middle school, this preternatural ability to detect the exact moment I might have something worth taking. "Sweetheart," she said in that breathy, performative voice she only used when she was about to ask for something. "We need to get the family together. A real dinner. It has been ages. You work too hard. We miss you." I was still wiping mascara off my cheek. I should have known. "Okay, Mom," I said. "Saturday at 7, Vespers. We are doing the private room. Dad already booked it." That should have been my first red flag. Vesper's private room cost $400 just to reserve. My father had been retired for 6 years, although what he was actually doing was sitting in a recliner watching cable news and complaining about his back. He had not personally paid for a meal that expensive in a decade. But I was floating on the promotion. I was floating on the idea that maybe, this time, my family wanted to celebrate something I had accomplished without making it about themselves. So, I said yes. I bought a new dress at Nordstrom. I got my hair done at the place in South End that charges way too much. I drove the 22 minutes to the restaurant with my heart doing the stupid, hopeful little flutter, like a teenager going to prom. I want you to remember that hopeful flutter. Because that is what they killed that night. The private room at Vespers has these enormous brass chandeliers and a single long table that seats 24. When I walked in at exactly 6:58, the room was already full. And I mean full. There were people I had not seen since my grandfather's funeral in 2014. My father's brother Lyle was there with his second wife, whose name I genuinely could not remember. My mother's sister Bernadette had flown in from Tampa. 3 of my cousins I went to elementary school with were sitting at the far end, drinking what looked like top-shelf bourbon. My younger sister, Mallory, was holding court near the head of the table, laughing too loudly at something her boyfriend Corbin had said. There were 22 people in that room. 22. I stood in the doorway in my new dress, and I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. "There she is," my father boomed, standing up at the head of the table with his arms spread wide. "The woman of the hour. Come on, sit. We saved you the good spot." The good spot, it turned out, was a chair to his immediate right. Directly in his line of sight, strategically placed. My mother got up and hugged me with that perfume she has worn since I was a child, the one that smells like an expensive candle going stale. "We are so proud of you, baby," she whispered. So proud. I had not even told them about the promotion yet. I had not told anyone. But somehow she knew. "How did you—" I started. Mallory mentioned something, she said, waving her hand. She has a friend at your company. Mallory does not have a friend at my company. Mallory does not have friends, period. Mallory has people she follows on Instagram and then ghosts when they ask her to pay back the $400 she borrowed for concert tickets. I sat down. The waiter materialized with a wine list as thick as a paperback novel. My father ordered a bottle of something Italian that I could see from the corner of my eye cost $180. Then a second one. Then a third. I want to walk you through what I watched over the next 2 hours, because this is the part where my chest started getting tight, and I need you to feel it the way I felt it. Cousin Wesley ordered the dry-aged ribeye, the $48 one, with the lobster tail add-on for another $32. Aunt Bernadette ordered the Chilean sea bass and a side of truffle mashed potatoes that came in its own little copper pot. Uncle Lyle ordered the porterhouse for 2 and ate it alone. Mallory and Corbin both ordered the Wagyu tomahawk, which the menu listed at $145 per portion, and then ordered a second one to share for dessert. My mother kept turning to me and squeezing my forearm and saying, "Order whatever you want, sweetheart. Tonight is your night." I ordered a Caesar salad and the grilled chicken. I ordered 1 glass of Pinot Noir. I drank water for the rest of the night. You see, somewhere around the second bottle of wine, I had started to do the math in my head. I have done this math my entire adult life. It is a reflex now, like flinching when someone raises a hand near your face. I had counted 22 heads. I had cocked the entrees, the appetizers, the 4 bottles of wine that had now become 5. I had a running total in my head, and that total was climbing past $5,000 and showed no signs of slowing down. My father had not picked up a menu the entire night. He just kept refilling his own glass and pointing at things on other people's plates and asking the waiter to bring one of those too. Around the time dessert arrived, I excused myself to the bathroom. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet and put my face in my hands and tried to breathe. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself my family loved me. I told myself that maybe, this was just a celebration. That the bill was being handled. That I was the guest of honor, and guests of honor do not pay. When I came back to the table, the check was sitting on the white linen, in front of my chair. Not in front of my father. Not in the center of the table. In front of my chair. It was inside one of those leather folio things, and the corner of the receipt was sticking out just enough that I could see the total printed in bold black ink. $7,247.86. I sat down very slowly. The conversation around the table had gone quiet in that fake, casual way. Conversations go quiet when everyone has been waiting for something to happen. My father cleared his throat. He had this expression on his face I had seen 1,000 times, the slight smile, the patient eyes, the waiting. "Sweetheart," he said, "you can just put it on your card. We will figure the rest out later." I looked at him. I looked at my mother. I looked at Mallory, who was suddenly very interested in her phone. "What do you mean, figure it out later?" I said. My voice came out flat, not angry, just flat. My voice came out flat, not angry, just flat. "Honey," my mother said, leaning toward me, "you got that big promotion. You make the most out of anyone here. It is just easier this way. We will all chip in eventually. Eventually. I have been hearing the word eventually from my family for 10 years. Eventually, they were going to pay me back for the $18,000 I put toward my parents' mortgage refinance in 2010 when my dad's credit score was too tanked to qualify. Eventually, Mallory was going to repay the $11,400 in rent and utilities I covered for her between 2021 and 2023 when she was trying to be a wellness influencer and posting yoga videos to 400 followers. Eventually, my dad was going to give me back the down payment on the used Acura I bought him in 2020 because the truck just is not reliable anymore, kiddo. Eventually had become a word that meant never. And I had let it. For 10 years, I had let it. Because every time I tried to push back, my mother would cry, and my father would tell me I was being difficult, and Mallory would post some passive-aggressive thing on Facebook about how some people in her family had forgotten where they came from. I sat there with that leather folio in front of me, and I felt something inside my chest go very, very still. "I am not paying this," I said. The silence at the table got bigger. Aunt Bernadette set her wine glass down. My father's smile flickered. Harlow, come on. Do not embarrass your mother in front of everyone. I am not embarrassing anyone, I said. My voice was still flat. I do not know where the flatness was coming from. I felt like I was watching myself from across the room. I will pay for what I ordered. I am not paying for everyone else. Sweetheart, my mother said, and her eyes were already filling up. She has a remarkable ability to cry on command. I've seen her do it at the DMV. You make 6 figures. You have no kids. Your sister is struggling. Your cousins drove all the way down here. We just wanted one nice night together. Then you should have planned a dinner you could afford, I said. Corbin actually laughed out loud. Not at me. At the situation, like he had bought tickets to a show and the show was finally starting. My father's voice dropped. He leaned in so close I could smell the Cabernet on his breath. Stop being difficult and just pay the bill, Harlow. You are making a scene. That is when I stood up. I picked up the leather folio. I opened it. I looked at the itemized receipt. I scanned down to my Caesar salad, my grilled chicken, my single glass of Pinot Noir. I added it up in my head. $43 and change. I added a 20% tip on my portion. $52 even. I walked to the front of the restaurant. The hostess looked startled when I asked her to split off my items onto a separate check. She glanced past me at the private room and then back at me, and I think she could tell from my face that this was not the night to ask questions. She tapped at the screen for about 90 seconds and then printed me a slip for $52. I paid with my debit card. I signed the receipt. I tipped the waiter an extra 20 in cash because none of this was his fault. Then I walked back to the private room. 22 faces turned to look at me. I set the leather folio back down on the table, in the empty space where I had been sitting. My portion is taken care of, I said. The remaining balance is yours to figure out. I picked up my coat. I picked up my purse. I walked out. My father was yelling my name before I got to the parking lot. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. I parked in the garage of my apartment building, and that is where I was sitting when the call started. 9 from my mother, 6 from my father, 4 from Mallory, 2 from Aunt Bernadette, 1 from a number I did not recognize, which I later figured out was my cousin Wesley borrowing the hostess's phone because they had run out of options at the restaurant. I did not answer any of them. I sat in that parking garage until my hands stopped shaking, and then I went upstairs and I poured myself a glass of water, and I sat on my couch in my new dress, and I felt for the first time in maybe 10 years like I could actually breathe. But here is the thing about my family that I did not know yet that night. Here is the part where it gets bad. It was Monday morning before I figured it out. I was at my desk, sipping my coffee, going through my work inbox, when I got a notification from Experian. I have credit monitoring set up because I work in fraud, and I am paranoid in the way only fraud professionals can be. The notification said a new credit inquiry had been pulled on my Social Security number Friday afternoon, less than 24 hours before the dinner. A car loan application for $68,000 at a Lexus dealership in Asheville. My stomach dropped. I pulled up my full credit report. I went line by line. There was a Capital One venture card I had never opened, with a $14,000 balance opened in November. There was a Discover card I had never opened, with a $9,100 balance opened in January. There was a personal loan from a credit union I had never heard of, for $22,000 originated in February. There was the Lexus application from Friday, and there was a HELOC against my parents' house, the house I had paid the mortgage refinance on. The HELOC was in my name, for $85,000, opened in October. The current balance was $71,000. I sat at my desk and I looked at those numbers and I felt something in me crack so cleanly that I did not even cry. So cleanly that I did not even cry. I just got very quiet and very still and very organized. I closed my office door. I called the fraud line at every single one of those institutions. I filed police reports with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office before lunch. I scheduled a meeting with the firm we use for civil litigation and fraud cases for that same afternoon. I had my credit frozen with all 3 bureaus by 2 p.m. I had an FTC identity theft affidavit submitted by 3. And then, only after every single legal mechanism was in motion did I sit down and start to think about how this had happened. The mortgage refinance in 2019. I had given my parents access to my Social Security number, my driver's license, my tax returns, every piece of personal documentation I owned, because that was what the lender had asked for to verify the gifted funds portion of their refinance. My parents had told me they shredded the documents afterward. I had believed them. The credit card statements had been going to my parents' house. They had updated my address with the issuers using my own login credentials, which they had because they were on my Netflix account and apparently had figured out my password recovery questions, which I had not changed since I was 19. The autopay on each fraudulent card had been set up to draft from a checking account at a regional bank in their hometown, an account opened in my name, but with their phone number listed for verification. It had taken them years of planning, years of small, patient steps. They had been bleeding me dry on the side while I sent them Christmas presents and called my mother every Sunday. The dinner had been the finale. The dinner had been the moment when they had assumed, correctly, that I would be too embarrassed in front of 22 relatives to refuse the bill. And once I had paid that $7,247 in front of everyone, they would have a witness pool. 22 people who would all swear, if it ever came to a courtroom, that I had voluntarily covered my family's expenses on countless occasions, that I had a pattern of generosity, that the cards and the loans and the HELOC were just more of the same. It was almost beautiful in a terrible way. The architecture of it. The Facebook post went up the next morning. My mother had typed it herself, I could tell, because of the way she spelled. It said that her own daughter, her firstborn, had publicly humiliated the family at a celebration dinner, had refused to honor the sacrifices made for her, had walked out on her elderly parents and her struggling sister, and was now refusing to take their calls. There were 3 crying emojis and a photo of me from my college graduation. 84 people had liked it by 10 a.m. I did not respond. What I did instead was forward the post to the defamation attorney I had retained the day before. What I did instead was provide my attorney with the police reports, the fraud affidavits, the bank records, and a complete timeline. What I did instead was call my parents' mortgage lender and inform them that the HELOC opened against the property was fraudulent and that the borrower listed had filed identity theft charges. The lender froze the account that afternoon. What I did instead was contact the title company for the Acura I had bought my father in 2020 and verify that the title was, in fact, still in my name. He had never signed it over. I had been so trusting back then. I filed a recovery petition. The car was repossessed from his driveway on a Thursday morning at 7 a.m. by a tow truck I had personally hired. What I did instead was contact the closing attorney from the 2019 mortgage refinance. I had a notarized gift letter from that closing, and I had been wise enough even then to specify that the funds were a personal loan with a documented repayment schedule, not a gift. The schedule had never been honored. My attorney sent a demand letter for the full $18,000 plus 6 years of accrued interest. My parents had 30 days to respond before we filed in civil court. My phone rang constantly. I let it ring. Mallory cornered me at a coffee shop 2 weeks later. She had clearly driven down from her apartment in Greensboro, which I was still, technically, paying for. She slid into the booth across from me and her mascara was already smudged. "You are destroying our family," she said. I looked at her. I really looked at her, in a way I do not think I had in years. I saw the lip filler. I saw the designer bag. I saw the manicure she had told my mother she could not afford last week, which was why my mother had asked me to send her another $500. "You forged my signature on a Discover card application," I said. She blinked. "You forged my signature, Mallory. The handwriting analysis came back yesterday. It was you." She started to cry. The performance was almost identical to my mother's. "I did not have a choice, Harlow. Mom and Dad, I am not pressing charges on you personally," I said. "If you sign a statement detailing exactly what they asked you to do, when, and why, the DA has agreed to consider full immunity for you in exchange for cooperation. You have until Friday." She stopped crying. She signed the statement on Thursday. My parents were charged with identity theft, bank fraud, mortgage fraud, and conspiracy in early March. The arraignment was on a Tuesday. I did not attend. I sat at my desk that morning and I did my job, and I did not cry and I did not look at my phone. The civil judgments came down over the summer. I was awarded a total of $187,000 in damages, plus legal fees. The judgment was secured against my parents' house. The house I had refinanced. The house was sold at auction in September. I attended that one. I sat in the back row in a navy blazer and a pair of sunglasses, and I watched a young couple from Raleigh place the winning bid for $300,000. My parents now live in a one-bedroom apartment in a complex outside the city. The rent, I understand, is being covered by my Aunt Bernadette, who has not spoken to me since the dinner and probably never will again. That is fine. I do not need her to. Mallory got immunity. She also got nothing else. The cards I had been paying off for her are now in her name. The rent I had been paying is now her problem. She works as a hostess at a chain restaurant in Greensboro and lives with 2 roommates in a duplex with a leaking roof. Last I heard, she had filed for personal bankruptcy. I have not seen her since the coffee shop. I made VP 3 weeks after the dinner. The promotion was already in motion, and nothing my family did was going to stop it. I bought myself a small house in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood in Charlotte. It has a sunroom and a back porch and a yard for the dog I adopted in May. Her name is Pepper, and she sleeps on the foot of my bed every night. I did not invite anyone over for the housewarming. I had a dinner for my work team and 3 close friends. We ordered pizza. We drank wine out of mismatched glasses. Nobody slid a check across the table. Sometimes, on Sunday mornings, I sit on the back porch with my coffee, and I think about that hopeful flutter I had in my chest driving to Vespers that night. I think about the woman I was, the woman who still wanted, after everything, to be told she had done a good job. I think about how she walked into that private room ready to be celebrated, and walked out of it carrying nothing but a $52 receipt and the first honest breath of her adult life. I do not miss them. That is the strangest part. I thought I would, and I do not. Some days I miss the idea of them, the version of them I had constructed in my head. The parents who would have been proud of me without keeping a tally. But the actual people? The ones at that table? I am not sure I ever really knew them, and I am very sure they never really knew them, and I am very sure they never really knew me. If you have a family that keeps score, listen to me carefully. They are not your family, they are your creditors, and you do not owe them a single dollar more than what you ordered off the menu. Pay your portion, tip your waiter, and walk out the front door. I think about that $52 receipt more often than I should. It sits in a drawer in my kitchen, folded in half, and sometimes when I am looking for a takeout menu, I see it and I stop for a minute and just hold it, because that little slip of paper is the cleanest record I have of the moment I stopped paying for the privilege of being treated like an ATM with a heartbeat. What happened to my family did not happen by accident. Every single thing that fell on my parents and on Mallory was something they had built themselves. One small dishonest choice at a time over a span of years. The mortgage they lost was the mortgage they had defrauded. The car that was repossessed was the car they had never legally owned. The reputation that crumbled on Facebook was the reputation they had spent a decade weaponizing against me. Cause and effect is patient, but it is not asleep. You can outrun consequences for a long time, especially when there is someone like the old me writing checks behind you, but eventually the math always catches up. Always. I used to confuse being a good person with being a quiet person. I thought that if I just absorbed enough, just gave enough, just kept the peace one more time, that would make me kind. It does not. Kindness without a spine is just fuel for somebody else's fire. Real character is being decent and being clear at the same time. I could love my mother and still refuse to let her drain me. I could grieve the family I wished I had and still file the police report on the family I actually had. Those things are not contradictions, they are the same act of integrity, viewed from different angles. The smartest thing I ever did, professionally and personally, was learning to look at a situation without flinching from what I was seeing. For 10 years I had every piece of evidence I needed to know what was happening to me, and I chose not to see it, because seeing it meant I would have to do something about it. Wisdom is not just knowing things, it is being willing to know things that are going to cost you. The credit monitoring alert on a Monday morning was not the moment I learned my family was stealing from me. It was the moment I finally let myself believe what I had known in my body since I was about 19. And the strength of it, the actual strength, was not in walking out of Vespers that night. Anyone can walk out of a room once. The strength was in waking up the next morning. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. And not picking up the phone. The strength was in choosing my small, quiet house over their loud, familiar chaos every single day, even on the days when I missed the chaos. Building a life you are not ashamed of is not one big decision. It is 1,000 small ones, made over years in private, when nobody is clapping. If any part of this story sounded like your story, I just want you to know something. You are allowed to pay your portion, tip your waiter, and walk out the front door.